For some of us, we deal with this topic of preparation or prepping, as people call it, and we're used to it. We talk about it a lot, and for others, maybe you've never dealt with it before, or you think it's the realm of the lunatic, or the fear-mongers and that sort of thing. It's become a very big topic over, I mean, if we go back not many years, it was considered something that just the absolute nutty end of the world survivalists were talking about. It's become a household topic. We have TV shows about it, American preppers and doomsday preppers, and there are dramas about it on TV. Jericho, Revolution. That's not about prepping, but that's about the what if afterward. We're not talking about that so much tonight, but we're talking about being prepared, basic preparedness in the midst of basic, or we'll call it basic difficulties. It creates a lot of fear among people in general when you bring up this topic, and it brings up a lot of fear and confusion, frankly, among Christians, because on one level, it will begin to challenge the things that we believe. We can start to think, well, wait a minute, if we're going into a bad time, we're going to be thrust into a stone age because of a nuclear blast, or an EMP blast, something like that, and it's not just our cell phones, but nothing's going to work, or there's going to be mass rioting in the streets, and there's all sorts of scenarios that can begin to play out in our minds, and then people start to talk about guns and ammunition, and we're not talking about that tonight. Okay, we're talking about very basic things that each one, we believe, should be thinking about, and we believe that it's biblical to do so. Some people think that this is just a nutty topic to talk about, because the kinds of things that preppers will talk about, the idea of the power grid going down, or something like that, is something that that's never happened. I mean, after all, this is America, and those things have never happened, so they won't happen. And that's generally called the normalcy bias. It's an attitude that we get. I've never seen that happen before, so therefore it can't happen. Which, of course, we all know that doesn't make sense, but that's the way we tend to think. It also confuses us as Christians to talk about this, because we're afraid, because we perceive ourselves as living in a Christian nation. We're afraid then that, well, this means persecution, and this means difficulty, and God wouldn't do that to us. Well, okay, go to Syria and talk to a Christian there, go to Egypt, we go to many places around the world. So, if it does have to do with persecution, it has to do with persecution, and if it doesn't, it's just a universal thing, and the rain falls on the just and the unjust. So we have to keep that in mind. These are important biblical principles to keep in mind as we go through the topic. Of course, some people think they're going to be raptured, and I expect to be raptured, and I hope I'm raptured before I need to utilize anything I've prepared for. But that doesn't mean that we would be raptured before that, because there's nothing in the Scripture that says exactly when we're going to be raptured in terms of these types of things. And of course, at another level, there's the fear among believers that if I start doing this, if I start prepping, if I save cash, if I save up food and prepare alternative sources of water and warmth and things like that, I'm showing a lack of faith. I don't have faith in God at that point. No, that's not true. He's actually told us to be prepared. But may I just ask, do you have a savings account? Why? Do we have health insurance or life insurance or disability insurance? Why? Because we hope we don't have to use them, but we like having it there when the occasion comes, because the occasion does come. And so all those things are not a lack of faith. There's wisdom in it. Now, they can go to the extreme, and it can be a lack of faith, all right? But there has to be balance in our lives as we walk through this. So we're a church that studies prophecy a lot, and I don't know how many of you realize that, but we do. And compared to a lot of other conservative believing churches, we spend a lot of time studying prophecy. We have prophecy updates on Wednesday night. We have a section on our website called Prophecy Update. Bob Ippolito, one of the men, will be up here on the panel, one of our elders. He runs that, and there's some people who who will be up here, who are a part of that too, who write articles and take prophecy and see fulfillment going on in our society. And it's a way of us, it's a resource for all of us here to be aware of these things and to prepare ourselves. As we began to look at this in early 2012, as elders, we believed that it was our responsibility to alert the congregation to the need for preparation. And so that's why we actually put together a preparation team, emergency preparation team, to look at this. You know, disasters can come in a lot of different forms. Certainly, we all lived through Hurricane Sandy. I didn't, actually, I shouldn't say all of us. I was in Israel enjoying myself and just missed my flight, and I had to spend a couple extra days. But you know, the average amount of time, at least around here, was 4 days without power. Some people were 3 weeks or more without power around here, let alone in Staten Island. You know, you think of the number of people just in this area affected by a hurricane. One of the things that's always stood out to me, it just got my attention many years ago, in 1998, in January of 98, a major ice storm hit. Some of you might remember southeastern Canada and New England. 4 million people were without power for almost 4 weeks. This is early January, for almost 4 weeks, because 3 inches of ice had fallen over a period of 3 days. Almost 4 weeks later, there were still something upwards of 600,000 people without power. There were 130 transmission towers that were ruined. There were 30,000 utility poles just snapped. Imagine what that does. When there's no electricity, then you don't get other utilities, things back up, right? So you saw that with Sandy and what happened at the shore and in Staten Island. So it's amazing how something as, and I'll just call it for our purposes, simple, can cause that type of trouble and disruption in our lives and in our society. So, you know, and of course, I'm not going to go into it now, but, you know, we've talked in the past about Y2K, and that was the problem that never seemed to come, and people laughed about it afterward, not realizing that it was the government and businesses that spent hundreds of billions of dollars to prepare so that it wouldn't be a problem. But the result is that many people laughed about it afterward, and it actually anesthetized us to the fact that we need to be prepared for trouble when it comes. And trouble can come in all sorts of fashions. It can be weather, it can be something like a computer issue, it can be terrorism, it can be a variety of different things. A few scriptures, and I might have put them on your paper. Proverbs, a lot of these are from Proverbs. In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all that he has. Paul says to Timothy, 1 Timothy 5, he says, if anyone doesn't provide for his family, he's denied the faith and he's worse than an unbeliever. Now, that's not necessarily taken out of context, but we can put it in the context of preparedness, that we have a responsibility to think about our loved ones and to say, okay, how are we going to deal with things if such and such an event occurs? And we do that, we will, this is part of there's a spiritual preparedness, that God's okay with me doing this and God wants me to do this. And there's mental preparedness, thinking it through in advance. Just like, we might tell our kids, okay, in the event of a fire in our home, this is what we're going to do. In the event of some sort of a problem, we're all going to this place, or whatever it may happen to be. We plan those things out so that when it happens, even if we haven't gone through the actual drill of walking to that place, we've got a mental map in our mind of what I ought to be doing, okay? We see how Joseph advises the Pharaoh, that God, working through Joseph, advising the head of the greatest kingdom at that time, to say, a famine is coming, this is how to put away stores of food, so that when it happens, you'll be ready. A wise man thinks ahead, a fool doesn't, he even brags about it, Proverbs 13. A prudent man sees evil, and he hides himself. And then the fool, the fool goes on and pays the penalty. Basically, the fool says, whatever, and he pays the penalty for doing that. The wise man sees danger coming and provides for it. Amos says that the sovereign Lord does nothing without revealing his plan to his servants, the prophets. John, are you saying that Hurricane Sandy is in the Bible? I'm not going to go that far today. I think after the rapture we might see that it was, but no, I'm not going to say that. But I am saying that the Lord is talking about major events in our world that certainly are in the Scripture. They're already foreordained, and also is giving us very clear instruction that we are to prepare ourselves, prepare our families, prepare our church. And so as elders, we saw that it was our responsibility to prepare the congregation for this. The purpose of this team that you're going to see, and we want to see this build, is to develop a biblical model, or a better word, I guess, a biblical view of how to prepare for disasters, whether they're small or whether they're large, so that individual Christians, Christian families, and the church can take care of ourselves, right, so that we can give glory to God in the midst of trying times, that we could provide for our households, that we can also then, having done that, now we can bring the gospel to others in the midst of that trial. Because there's a tendency, when you think about survivalists, there's a tendency to think of just hunker down, everybody's your enemy. And that, we're called to be light and salt, right? And that's a balance. We're not going to be able to hit all the topics tonight, but that's a balance that has to be struck. But unless we're taking care of our family first, we can't really take care of others, right? So you can go on the website. You can learn a lot about preparedness. Some of these things that we'll pass out tonight are not on the website. There are two sites. If you go under the menu item Learn, you will see Preparedness. You'll also see Prophecy Update. And in both those places, you can read and you can download lots of information there. There are all kinds of disasters, big ones and small ones. And frankly, what is a minor inconvenience to some people? The power goes out for a couple of days. It's not the end of the world. But for some people, it could be, depending upon their place in life, depending upon disabilities they might have. There's all sorts of things. So that's where we need to be aware of the body too, so that we can begin thinking about our brothers and sisters. Some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, like where'd this all come from? Well, if you haven't noticed, the government is taking steps. If the government is taking steps, it's because the government recognizes that things are going to happen. So if even the government is taking those steps, we should have more wisdom. We're going to deal tonight with just a few basic areas, okay? We're going to deal with food, water, warmth, medical, spiritual, communications. Those are the basic areas we're going to deal with. And you have a sheet of paper that really just has a whole lot of blank space so that you can take some notes. And at the end of this, there will be there's a stack of things that look like this out in the back. You're welcome to take it. It's probably 6-7 pages long with a variety of articles about all of the things that I just said. And then also, just so that you know, we're trying to build a team and really a database of people who have various skills, people who are electricians, not just limited to this, I'm just saying, people who are electricians, who carpentry, who like wood, just work with your hands, or if you're a plumber, things like that, whatever your skills may happen to be, so that when we see a problem coming, we can now begin to communicate with one another, say, let's try to help one another. So we'll get into more of that in a moment. There are 5 people that you probably know, but I'm going to introduce them before they come up. First of all, Bob Ippolito, who is one of our elders. He's going to be talking about water. He's the one who is the Bible answer guy and runs the prophecy update on the website. Jackie Cunning is the head of the preparedness team, and she's going to handle the food along with Rich Timmons. They'll both handle food, and she's also going to handle the medical side of things. You're going to see Scott Walbridge, who will handle communication, and then Jill Petrie, who will handle spiritual preparedness and responding spiritual response at a time of crisis or trauma. Some of that, kind of goes over into chaplaincy. But so we're all going to kind of take 5 minutes each, talk about that, and then we'll begin to open it up to a Q&A. So I'm going to invite the panel to come on up. The panel. I don't think we've ever said the panel around here. And I'll let Rich start with things. There's a clicker somewhere. There we go. It's for you.
Well, there you go. Just want to make sure that we have a sound check. We okay? Good. All right, so we wanted to start our discussion tonight from our panel by sharing a few other facts that we think might help you realize the importance of being prepared. And we actually believe that you probably are already prepared in some way, but we want to make sure that you're even prepared better than how you're prepared. So I just want to give you a few facts. For example, we live in a highly populated area. 60 million people live between Boston and Washington, D.C. We live smack in the middle of 60 million people. 700,000 of us residents live in Bucks County. So the reason I make this point is that in the event that there is a need to start to find food after a few days of being out of electricity, you can imagine how difficult it's going to be with that many people trying to find food. So we just want you to be aware of that fact. The other thing that we want you to think about is the fact that we now live in a take-it-for-granted society. We become a people of convenience and assumption. I can get anything I want 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I assume that the shelves will always be full of food. So if you recall the snowstorm of October 30th, 2011, I think it caught us all by surprise. Some of us were out of electricity and out of power for 5-7 days. Interestingly, within 5 days, the electricity went on, the roads were cleared, and the shelves were stocked again. So here's what's kind of interesting, though. We were all somewhat prepared for a 5-day blackout. But now, if for some reason we lost power and we were out of electric for 10 days or 15 days, would you have enough food to be able to work through that time of difficulty? And then the bigger question for us is, well, what happens if we don't have food for 30 days? So I mentioned earlier about how within 5 days stores get recycled with food. And that's because of a little terminology that's known as just-in-time supply chain management. Now, I think you've all heard of this idea. It's called just-in-time supply chain management. It's a great concept. So what this is rather than stockpiling inventory, food is systematically controlled, and it comes into our communities just in time. There's no waste, there's no storage, there's no big warehouses. Lots of money is saved by that. By the way, Toyota is the people that got all the credit for this concept back in 1965 called just-in-time chain management. Interestingly, though, the president of Toyota, his name is Oh No. It is. He got this idea when he visited the United States back in 1965. And he was amazed at the process that food was moved into our supermarkets. And he took that idea home and he revamped the entire Toyota manufacturing process to a terminology that we now read about in textbooks called just-in-time chain management. So now, here's the point though. With just-in-time in place in supermarkets, meaning that everything from apples to zucchini arrives just in time. But here's what happens. Without electricity, vehicles can't pump gas to put in the trucks to deliver the food just in time. So as a group, we started asking ourselves, what are the basics necessary for personal, sustainable, in a difficult situation? And we concluded that they are four, which you're aware of now that we're going to talk about. They are food, water, medicine, spiritual situations, and communications. And so with that, we're now going to kind of bounce around and talk about some of these things. And Jackie, you're up first.
So this, can you hear me okay? This is a very brief overview. You can go into great detail when you're talking about preparedness and food. Obviously, food is very important to all of us. And so what I intend to do is just maybe wet your palate a little bit with this. And hopefully, you know, we can approach this that you'll know what you're looking for, you'll know the right questions to ask. And as we go through this, be thinking a little bit about like the nutritional values and how you yourself eat at home. So what you want to do is closely mimic the way you eat at home now to the best of your ability. What you don't want to do is spend a lot of money on things that you're just not going to ever eat. It's just a waste. So in starting, I'm going to put up a graph here. There you go. I don't know if you can see that. It actually goes a little longer there. Oh, it is 2 slides. Okay. So we'll be looking at that off and on here. I'll bounce back and forth. The first one we'll talk about is canned foods. It's one of the most affordable for people. You can go to BJ's, you know, Big Lots, all those places, and you can purchase canned goods. A couple things to think about. They're ideal if you're staying at home. You need to rotate that stock because the shelf life on canned goods is only 1 to 3 years. And after 1 year, one of the things that tends to happen with canned goods is the nutrition in there, the nutritive value starts to leach out into the liquid that it's contained in, and then we end up dumping that part out. And they're very heavy to transport, so it's not something you could put in an emergency bag and leave the home with. It is cost effective, like we said. It can be very high in sodium. The liquid in the cans can skew the measurement when you're looking at servings. So if you're trying to calculate for your family of 4, you really do have to take into account that there's liquid in there as well. They do have preservatives. I think I might have said that. So I'm going to go to this next one. You can be looking because it gets into weights and servings and how much space this is going to take up, because this could be a big deal for us. Okay, and yes, there is everything I have up here. I believe there's copies in the handout, or you can find everything that I'm discussing as well as all of us on the line as well. So we talked about canned goods. I want to go into MREs a second, because that's the one that I think everybody kind of thinks has to do with all these doomsday preppers. They all have MREs or something. That's not it. Not there. Okay. Not there. No big deal. Okay. MRE stands for Meal Ready to Eat, and you hear about those from the military. Our military soldiers have had these for forever, and I'm sure anybody in the military probably has some really fond memories about eating their MREs. But they can tend to be expensive. They run about $45 to $60 per case. That's not including shipping and handling. So when you're looking to order things online, please be aware of shipping and handling costs based on weight. It can get very pricey. You get about 12 meals per case, and the shelf life on MREs is about 3 to 5 years. It's very temperature sensitive, that shelf life for MREs. You'll find this online as well, I believe, or in one of the handouts. There's a graph that shows you, based on the temperature, the warmer temperatures, the shelf life of MREs significantly decreases. They're very low in fiber, and we can get into a whole discussion on that, but we're not going to. Very high in sodium, on average about 3,800 milligrams of sodium in one meal. So that's kind of high. So if you're somebody with health problems that has to watch your sodium intake, you need to be aware of what you're purchasing. It's good for staying in a controlled environment, again, just like canned goods, because they're heavy, they're bulky. Yes, you can take them, you can throw a case in your car if you need to, but again, just being aware that it is heavy. it's better to find the MREs that have their own heating system in them, which is usually, it looks like those warming packs, those hand warmers that you ski with. It's pretty amazing, actually, how it works. So moving into the differences between freeze-dried and dehydrated food. Technically, all freeze-dried food is dehydrated, but not all dehydrated food is freeze-dried. And I'll explain that in a second. Dehydration takes out some of the water, okay? Tends to shrink up the food like a raisin, if you think of something like that. Freeze-drying is different. What it is it's dehydrated, and then what's happened is it's not dehydrated, it's flash frozen, and then the water or the ice that's frozen is then turned into a gas and pulled off. So dehydration, things shrink up, think of it that way. It does reduce moisture content, and it's good for certain things like fruits, legumes, things like that. Some vegetables are good as dehydrated. But because there's heat involved, when you rehydrate a dehydrated item, it doesn't always come back to its original shape and taste. You've probably noticed that if you've ever had dehydrated foods. The two main benefits of dehydrated foods are it generally costs less per ounce than freeze-dried, and you can usually fit more into a can because it does shrink down so much. So if you're thinking and you're concerned about storage, dehydration may be the way to go. Meats are usually found as dehydrated. Dehydrated meats are usually found like jerky, beef jerky, turkey jerky, all that stuff. So you don't actually see much in the line of meat in a freeze-dried product. They do have some preservatives also. When you talk about freeze-dried, this means, like I said, they're flash frozen, remember that, so the water content is taken out of it. So the original size and shape, when it's reconstituted, are regained, and the flavor is pretty much there. So in order to rehydrate this food, it does take some water. So when you're calculating your water, for your family, you also have to take into consideration that some of these foods really do need to be a certain amount of water to be rehydrated. Okay, the downside to freeze drying is that it's a more complicated process for them to manufacture, so it's more expensive typically. And when you'll hear people try to sell you bulk packaging for a year's supply, just really be careful when you read this, because sometimes they mix dehydrated, canned, and also freeze-dried. All those things have very different shelf lives, so be very careful when you're looking at the promises of 25-year shelf life, okay? The most common misuse of that, like we talked about, was those year supply containers. But just, I'm not promoting a particular company, but I found this very interesting, and my family and I have tried this particular brand, and we really liked it, was Mountain House, because an additional independent university studies showed that Mountain House brand of freeze-dried foods, now this is in a type 10 can, we can get into all that in the Q&A after, but in a type 10 can, even under not so ideal temperature conditions, can have a shelf life of greater than 25 years. They also, for people who have health concerns or special diets that they're on, Mountain House also makes gluten-free as well as vegetarian meals. So that's always good to know. And that's about all I have on the food topic. So. Oh.
Okay, is the mic working? Okay. Okay, we're going to talk about the availability of water and what do we do about it when it's not as available as we need. Starting off with the fact that regarding the dehydrated or freeze-dried food, putting the water in there, and in dehydration you can let it sit overnight, like let some beans or peas, something like that. But when it comes to the freeze-dried, you usually have to put boiling water in it to reconstitute it. So there's also a need for extra energy, which may not have been in your calculations.
If you've lost power?
You've lost it, that would be, yeah, a little less energy. On water, the way I'm approaching that is you think of purifying water as a stepwise process. It's multi-step. The things you have to think of what can contaminate water, and that's the way we'll approach it here. But I've taken it as two different scenarios. Scenario number one would be that whoops, wrong button, there we go. The drinking water is scarce or not available for a few days. That could be something like, the pump at the water company that keeps the water moving is out. And so all you have is what's in your pipes, et cetera, at the time. So the action plan for that case would be, you've got good water, you have to catch it while you can, as fast as you can. So what you do is you go get it and you put it away and use it as you need it. The source would be the plumbing in your house, your hot water tank. There's a good tank there, probably with about 50, 75 gallons of good drinking water that you can use. Bottled water that you've already collected and stacked up. I have a friend that has ceiling to floor, left to right cases of water. And the caveat I have here, how do we get that to go up a little higher? I can't control that.
You just look up or look down.
Okay. I don't know.
Very
No.
intuitive. Yeah.
No.
That's how you turn it off.
Yeah, okay, let's turn it on.
Okay.
I want some stuff down there. All right. The caveat, let's try the next
To
slide.
advance it
Maybe
to the
that's
right.
where it
There you
went. Okay. The caveat is do not use pool water, swimming pool, or your spa, or your radiator water, or your waterbed water. I've seen many books advising that that's available. It's a good source. It isn't, because most of those items you put in an algicide to prevent the growth of algae, and that's not removable with the regular water purification equipment, so don't do that. But you can use that to refill the tank on your toilet, so you can get more flushes. And so to start out with, go with the water that's already in the tank and use that. Don't use the bowl. It's not a good idea. The way we want to treat that water is simply, it's already good. We just don't want it to go bad. So we use bleach, regular 5.25% Clorox bleach without any fragrances or anything, because that can't be removed. And it doesn't taste good to eat that stuff. Collection, your plastic juice bottles that you already have that you've emptied, save some of those because you can use them for such an occasion. Or your full ones, when you finish them, don't throw them out until you know the water problem is over. Storage should be in a cool, dark place like your basement, because it holds back bacterial growth. And you should have a manual flow pump available in case you need well water. You can use that to get, if you have a long enough drop, get water out of there. Treated water, this is scenario number 2. Treated water may not be available for weeks. If it's only a short period of time, you can make it through maybe with what's already in your house that we just talked about. You must purify your own water if you run out of what's available and you can't get to the stores, their shelves are clean. What are you going to do? This is the most important resource that you need from a physical standpoint. You can lose a lot of fat weight, won't hurt you. You can lose a lot of, don't take this personal, you lose a lot of protein weight and that won't hurt you. But if you lose a mere 10% of water weight, that can be fatal. So there's no excuse. Failure is not an option. You've got to have the water. And that creates potentially a crisis situation. The source of your water for non-drinking purposes or for purification, which is what you're going to have to go to here, is rivers, lakes, streams. You could set up a cistern with your downflow from your gutters, the downspouts. And I would say the guideline here is assume contamination by debris, microbes, or chemicals. Don't assume, oh, maybe this is okay and I can drink it, because the mistake can be fatal. Caveat, same one here, we don't use the water that has algicide in it. When I say purification, we're talking about two things, filtration and disinfection. What's used mostly is a multi-stage pump. You can collect your water from that purification and use bleach to preserve it. And so what you do is you use 8 drops per gallon. And on the handouts, I have some other quantities calculated for larger amounts. And if, looking at the amounts that I have there, if the water's cloudy, use double that amount of bleach. Storage, again, cool, dark place. 3 of the best filters out there, company-wide, are Pure, P-U-R, Katahdin, and Berkeley, I think it is, but no, Berkfeld, that's the right one. And the thing here that we're trying to do is we're trying to go through the steps that we need according to what the source of our water was. I wish that there was one filter that could do everything, but there isn't. If the water is not pre-treated and ready to drink, you must assume there may be virus in there. Virus is difficult to get rid of. So you pretty much need a microfiber filter to get rid of the protozoa, the bacteria. And then you need chemical disinfection or UV disinfection to kill the virus at the end. So it may take a few steps. There's something very special about taking care of your water needs in terms of witnessing or not being threatened. If you have a way to purify your water, which you're going to need to in this scenario, you can keep purifying water until the cows come home. That Katahdin filter does 13,000 gallons before it needs to be replaced. And it's a small thing. I have it over here. So if someone comes and says, my family doesn't have any water, say, bring me some dirty water and I'll purify it for you. So it's a way to share your ability to take care of yourself with someone else without being threatened. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Good. Moving on to the medical. I know we had, there it is, sorry. Okay. So we're talking about medical kits, and if you're anything like me, when I started this, I'm in the medical profession, and I was very confident in the fact that I had everything all over the house. I could go to this cabinet and get my Band-Aids, this cabinet and get my gauze and my peroxide, but nothing was where I needed it quick enough. So going through this personally has really helped me too. There's different ways to go about this. You can buy a prefab medical kit. There are a lot of really bad ones out there because they're very cheap, very expensive they can be, and they don't give you a lot of what you really need. So one of the ones that we've done some of our research on is the Mountain series, the Adventure Medical Mountain series. The reason why I say that is it's set up with pockets, and you'll notice there on the right, when you're under stress, whether it's your kid who skins his knee and he's screaming his head off, or you've cut yourself and your adrenaline is up, you want to be able to go to the right packet. The nice part about a medical kit like this is you can go to the appropriate packet for lacerations, for burns, for bee stings, and immediately just grab what you need right out of there. Anything that reduces your stress in a situation like that is always good, no matter how small the situation is. The nice thing about this particular medical kit is it comes with a handbook, a medical handbook, a quick reference book. It's always nice to have. So again, you're going to see in any prefab medical kit minimal amounts of things that you genuinely would use more often. So aspirin, Tylenol, gauze, Band-Aids, they'll give you a couple. So you're always going to have to add. If you purchase something, you're going to add something and personalize it for yourself, for your family. You'll see on the website we mention a few medical books. One of the books that I find I use even on the mission field a lot is this particular book. It's called Where There Is No Doctor. It's by David Warner. It's very simplistic. It has pictures. It can walk you through the basics, and even throughout a longer period of time when they were referring to greater than 30 days, if you can't get to your doctor and you have a situation, if you have health problems, it addresses a lot of this. So it's very simplistic, very user-friendly. So I recommend that book. One of the things to think about when you're doing a medical kit is if you have a travel kit that you can throw in your car, like this one, that's always good. Personally, I keep a second bag as well that I put the additional supplies that I'm going to need in. I would like to cover a little bit more of that, just maybe to make you think about how you would customize your own medical bag, which is really crucial to have. 3 months supplies of prescription medications. We all, comfortably call our doctor and go, I need my refill. But many of the insurance companies now do pay for 3 month supplies. So my encouragement is to always keep 3 months supply of your medication handy. So if you're somebody with heart or blood pressure problems, if you're a diabetic, if you require diabetic supplies and things that perhaps need to be refrigerated, these are all things to be thinking about as you're putting your bag together for your family. Always include lists of things that are important. A list of your medications, your current medications, your family's medications, food or environmental allergies, always important. Make sure you have extra EpiPens, Benadryl, medical alert bracelets. If you've never gotten one and you need one, get one. They're really important to have. The next thing is making you think along the lines of, okay, so what if it's a snowstorm and you just can't get to the store for a few days? Cold and flu seasons, cold medication. You want to augment that bag with some cold and flu medications. On the website, you'll see a document that says important documents to have. Very important to keep something like that handy with you in case you do need to leave your home for an emergency, whether it be a gas leak, whatever, down power lines, anything. So you need to have a list of who your primary care doctors are, their phone numbers, specialists that you may have, and their contact numbers, copy of your life insurance policy, your health insurance cards, driver's license, credit cards. All those things are really important to keep handy. And so if we go into then, okay, how do we really personalize this now again? People with small children, you have to think ahead. Baby formula, diapers, lotions for the baby, things that you would really not have to run all over the house to collect if you had to go somewhere. We just really want to reinforce the importance of printing in advance these things out, because if the power goes out, you can't print them. So all these great lists are online, but we need to print them out. And there's some other documents on the website that will walk you through step by step through all of this. There's a family preparedness plan, so you can make it user-friendly for your whole family and encourage your children to do it with you. And it takes the fear out of preparation for kids as well by doing it. So family communication plan is the last thing I'll say. That's part of one of those documents. Just to know, how do you communicate with each other? Even if somebody's having a health problem at home and you're not at home, it's always good to have those communication plans together in advance. So that's all I have.
Hi, is this on? I have the DIY special here. My name is Jill, and I'm sitting here listening to everybody and thinking, wow, I've got a lot of lists I have to make on my own, and if I'm up here chattering, it's because I'm freezing. But Rich has assured me that if I roll myself off in the carpet due to his research, I can increase my body temperature incredibly. So
And clean
we're
the
all
house, too.
learning.
And clean the
Exactly,
house.
and clean the house as well. I just want to say, I've been a believer a long time, and the longer I've been a Christian and the more I've surrendered my life to full-time ministry, the more I realize the less I have to offer personally. And it's an enormous privilege to be a part of serving and just delivering and being a proclaimer of the gospel. But the more I realize I need him. And it's him that we want to point people to, his word, and it really takes the burden off of us, and the reality is he is the mighty and wonderful counselor. So in any situation, when somebody's coming and you face, whether it's trauma or medical situation, just keep him in mind, be praying, and the word of God. The things that I'm going to talk about is not so much a list, but it's the condition of our heart and working on that now. It's hard to pick up the Bible and use it as a 911 when a crisis comes up and trying to find that exact verse. Now's the time to start filling up your own heart and let the Lord do that transforming work, so that when the situation comes, the things that are going to flow out of your heart are what he's already been putting in for a long time. So I can't emphasize that enough. We all have different personalities, styles, and gifts and characters, and when I think about whether it's Paul or Jesus, there's over 50 personal encounters he has with people, and though the truth is never compromised, he's always doing it a different way. Sometimes he's sitting with somebody, sometimes he's talking, and just you can go on and on. So there's there's no formula. It's the exact way to treat a person and help a person. Just make sure everything you're doing truly is wrapped in love, and we'll talk a little bit about that more. But when you're talking about a trauma situation, something big in particular, it's always good, even though I'm the spiritual counseling kind of focusing on that, is to do a quick triage. And Jackie and I have worked a lot together, and sometimes we can be so focused on what we need to say spiritually that we're missing the fact that they're having a large hemorrhage out of the side of their head and probably could use a Band-Aid before we, give them the gospel. So just asking them a quick couple of questions. Are you okay? Taking a little look around and looking at them, seeing if they're in hurt, if they're in pain. And ask them, is there anyone right now that you'd like us to contact or that you're missing? Because trauma often produces shock. People aren't thinking clearly, or they're more concerned about their children that they can't find. So sometimes those things, if you can tend to them first, then they're in a better position to hear what you're going to give them in terms of comfort and the gospel. So I think triaging is really important, taking that priority first. In whether it's a simple situation or a big situation, listen. You can ask a few questions, but listen. Sometimes we're so quick to speak and we're not hearing where they're really hurting or where their fears are. And so I think really asking the Lord give you ears to hear, love them with your words, but also with your actions. Sometimes just our body posture or sitting down, letting them know, I've got time for you, I'm here. Those kinds of things are all really important when you're giving comfort in those situations. And asking those good questions, and that cycle will repeat itself. You might ask a couple of questions, summarize what they say, then you want to offer them a couple of words of comfort, listen some more, and you kind of want to go into a cycle like that until you're really getting a good understanding of where they are and where their needs are. Look, all of us, if you know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, hopefully you know how to give the gospel, and we can all offer comfort. But if there is a situation that you come across that's traumatic or a crisis, and you sense, hey, I think maybe there's some legal issues here, or maybe issues of abuse or things like that, or the person's in a situation where maybe it's just a little bit more intense than you feel comfortable with. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we, particularly that person, should. There might be somebody who's a little bit more well-versed in a situation. We might need to bring them along. And so, again, those things will come out in conversations that we have. And don't overlook just the power of providing a tangible need. Again, we could get focused on our words, but they may just need something to drink. They may have come out of a fire situation and, you got fire trucks, water coming out, and they're sitting there soaking wet. They could use a blanket, a jacket. Something that's immediate, provides comfort. Again, it's soothing, and it will allow them to pay a little bit more attention to what you have to say. Often people just offering to call somebody. I don't know about you, but I've come across a couple of accidents where I couldn't do anything for that person, but I had a phone. And they couldn't think to even punch the buttons, and I could place the phone calls and at least just be there visibly until somebody else who could offer that help was able to do that. And I think it's really important that we really keep in mind that we're ambassadors of the King. And that word, I think, is really important because it truly means as if we were representing the person as if that person were there. So it's the message of the King, but it's also in the means of the King, how he would deliver it, and also in the character of the King. I think many of us have probably been the recipients of good, godly advice, but it's been slammed at us, or we've had more of a sheep beating than a sheep feeding experience. And you miss that message because it wasn't delivered in the love that, God calls us to. And the character of the King. Sometimes we can get excited and not realize we're yelling at the person and they're not deaf, but it can come off, kind of cold. And so, as you're studying and growing, remember that God's shaping your heart too. And I guarantee he won't put you in a situation unless he intends to teach both that person and yourself. So, I'm usually constantly praying when somebody comes into my path. And then remember, the gospel is the ultimate comfort. No matter what happened, whether it's a sinful situation, Christ hung naked on a cross for us so that we freely could come. There's nothing that he didn't die for. If it's a traumatic death or a injury or whatnot, Hebrew tells us there's nothing that Jesus himself didn't experience. He's the one who knows. So you want to keep that in mind. And then just running through quickly, remember, our confidence is in him, and it's in the Word. It's not in ourselves. And discipleship and loving isn't always easy. It usually does require sacrifice, whether it's time or something that we have to offer. And lastly, if you have a personal story, something you can share to help relate, that's a great way to make a connection with somebody. But just remember, try not to focus on your situation, but focusing on God who helped you in your situation, and point the person to him, giving him the glory. So thank you for your time.
Communication, the last topic here tonight. So let me ask the basic question. Why do we need to be concerned about communication during a time of crisis? And the answer is probably intuitive to you already, but two main points that I think are really important to keep in mind. That you will want to know how your loved ones are doing, and you'll want your loved ones to know how you're doing. And also you may need to request assistance or provide assistance to somebody else in need. So those are the two main reasons why we need to make sure that we are able to communicate in disaster. So how do we do this? How do we prepare? The first point, Jackie mentioned this earlier, is create a communication plan with your family and friends, a group of people whom you're close to it. That's going to be the most important thing. What should you include in that communication plan? And there's actually a document on the website here that you can print out and fill out. But essentially, you're going to need a list of all the names, email addresses, phone, social media sites. Put that all into one central place in a document that you'll then spread out and share with your group. Next point is designate a point of contact locally and even somebody out of state that your group can contact. If for some reason you aren't able to communicate, at least you can reach back up to somebody else, and then they can coordinate any communication that you may not be able to take care of yourself. That person can also help coordinate evacuations or medical care if needed. And then determine a predefined meeting place. This could be important if you do have to evacuate. Make sure that your group of people know that you're going to meet up at a specific place. That'll be really key, especially if you have very limited means of communication. So what do we do during What do we do during and after a disaster? So the main thing that you're going to want to do is communicate with that group of people. You're going to want to reach back out to them and let them know that you're okay, or that you need something, or they're going to have to reach out to you and say, hey, I need help. So how do we do that? If technology is still working, obviously we have our cell phones, so we can use those. If you can't get through on a voice call, sometimes the network gets so congested, texting or emailing could get through, whereas a voice call might, so you might want to try that as well. Or posting status on social media sites. I've read in past disasters around the world, people didn't have any means to communicate, but they found out about their loved ones on the social media sites. So that's an option too, if you can get to a place that has access if you don't. And finally, forward your home phone if you have to evacuate to your cell phone, just so that you won't miss any phone calls. So how do we communicate? We've talked about the reasons why preparing in advance, but what are some of the tools that we have available to us? And again, most of these are technology related, so I'll go through those first. The first one, obviously, is a cell phone. We all know how to use that. Almost everyone has one. Social networks, I've mentioned that one. That can be a popular one. If the social network sites go down, people might be getting the jitters. I don't know who really stay on those a lot. Anyway, the social network sites are down. CB radios are a great option. If you all remember back to the 70s and 80s, driving around in your pickup truck, these were very popular. So you might have one in your garage somewhere. It's also a great item that you can put in a bug-out bag to take with you. The range, is decent. It's 20 to 30 mile radius range. If you don't have a CB, you can go a little step down. Would be two-way radios, walkie-talkie. Those, 5 to 20 mile ranges. They can be very handy as well for more local communication. And finally, if you're really into the radio aspect of this, ham radios. I don't know if anybody here has ever used a ham radio. But those actually have great communication capacities over very long distances. Just as a caveat, when I was in high school, I actually went to boarding school in North Carolina while my family lived in Haiti. And the only means of communication I had to speak with my parents was by ham radio. So a couple times a year, I'd get somebody nearby and my parents would grab another missionary and we'd have a little conference. That was my only means of communication. So that range can extend over hundreds of miles as well if needed. Lastly, this is all dependent upon technology, and like we've indicated earlier, that may not be possible. So what really is the last stop for us? And I want to give a plug for what I think is the most important means to stay in touch with loved ones. And the best option that we as a body provide is home fellowships. This is a group of people that you will already establish a relationship with, and intuitively that group takes care of each other. The relationships are already established. And just thinking back to Sandy last year, for those of you who were in a home fellowship or who are in a home fellowship, you may remember that, at least for mine, we were automatically just staying in touch with each other. We were checking up on one another. And actually there was one member of our fellowship nobody could get in touch with. So the phones wouldn't work, we couldn't contact that person. So we got somebody who lived nearby to actually drive over and make sure that person was okay, and they were. But it's a great support network that all of us could need at some point in the future. And I would say that we probably will need it. Unfortunately, the majority of our body is not currently involved in a home fellowship. So I'm going to put up a map here to show you these red dots, if you can see them, are the current locations right around Doylestown there, right in the middle of where our current home fellowships meet. The next slide, if I can get it to go, it's a little tough to see. This is the one I'm looking for. This one. Okay, the blue dots are where the current home fellowships meet. The yellow flags are all the people within our body who are not currently involved in a home fellowship. So you can see how exposed you might be if you're not involved. And lastly, I really want to encourage all of you to consider getting involved in a home fellowship so that you can have that support system down the road when we need it. And John mentioned earlier, I want to reiterate again that we are working to establish a database with people and your specific skill sets, and that's going to become critical for the home fellowships to know that, so that if there is a need, we can immediately go to those people with that skill sets, and then they can disperse out and help those people who have that need. That's it. Thank you.
All right. So let's try to do this in the time that we have remaining. We have 10 minutes. Any questions? Warmth. warmth was, as we put it together, we said we have food, we have water, medical, we have spiritual communication. Then it's like, well, wait, what about warmth? Oh yeah, it's warmer in here now, isn't it, Jill? Yeah, okay. So that's the problem. If electric goes out, we tend, depending upon your, what kind of heating you have, to lose heat. So first of all, there are various things you can do initially. If you have a fireplace, obviously, that sort of thing, you can use that. If you have a kerosene heater, you can use that. I wouldn't run it without a carbon monoxide detector, battery-powered carbon monoxide detector. And it does create, all these things have some form of waste. So there's some sort of, like, even if it's 1% of smeech that's in the air, you're breathing it. So you got to remember that kind of stuff. So ventilation is important. If you have access, and this is something you want to be prepared for in advance, if you have access to a generator and can use that, hardwire it in so that it can keep your burner running, then okay, now you got that. Or it can run your well pump so that you can get water. That won't last forever because you still have to fuel it. And if you run out of fuel because it's an extended issue, then that's a problem. But at least in terms of short-term situations, you can do that. People get creative, and at some point, people find they have to leave where they are and go somewhere else where they can get that warmth if it's an extended situation. Especially, it happened, going back to the one I talked about earlier, the ice storm. You're not going to hang out in your house in Vermont in January, after an ice storm for 4 weeks without some form of heat, or you're also ice. So that's where evacuation and sort of thing can happen. But that's the kind of thing to be thinking about in advance, what steps you'll take when that comes. Do not store fuel in your home. Just don't do that. Other questions?
John, just one other thing. I'm always cold, so I go to Target, Kmart, Walmart, whatever, and buy those Hot Pockets, things like that. They come in body form now. You can adhere them to the inside of clothing, and I've been in situations, some of them last up to 12 hours. They can actually get extremely hot. They really do work. So they're not that expensive, and in a short-term situation, it's amazing the heat they can throw off, whether you want to put them in your socks, hands, body. They have them now for everything. I'm waiting for the full body one, but they're inexpensive. They really work in a pinch. So.
And we are a society that likes to dress, with a shirt on. That's a time where it's like, okay, I don't have heat, so we layer our clothing, and being prepared in advance is important. And frankly, having that in your car, because the disaster can happen on the road. So other questions?
Along the lines of how valuable information can be in a disaster, I have a hand crank radio
Yes.
with shortwave, and it has an adapter for cell phone to charge the cell phone.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you didn't hear that, you can get these hand cranked radios. They're not expensive at all. So now you can be in communication, find out what's going on. But many of them also have the ability to charge your cell phone. And cell phones are great. I mean, I joked earlier that I was in Israel when it went down, with Hurricane Sandy came, but I was still able to communicate with Renee by cell, as long as the cell tower still had energy. That's the issue, So, Barb.
Brita pitcher, how, the filter that's in a Brita pitcher, how will that work with the water?
Right. The question has to do with a Brita pitcher, and how effective is that, Bob?
They're pretty much used to treat already clean water. It's mainly carbon, which removes foul taste and chemicals. Yeah, it wouldn't
We can't
come
hear
to
you.
the level-
Speak louder.
It wouldn't come to the level that you would call purification. When we
So-
talk about purification, we're talking about getting rid of debris, protozoa, bacteria, and viruses. And it's not going to get rid of, I don't think, any of those.
So the answer for those who couldn't hear is that a Brita pitcher really isn't going to be that effective in taking care of, especially the biologics. Steph?
Would water purification tablets or bleach kill the microbes that you just mentioned?
Yeah, bleach will kill everything, boiling it will kill everything. What was the third one you mentioned?
Water purification tablets?
Water purification tablets are essentially
Yeah.
chlorine tablets or iodine tablets. The iodine tablets and some of the filters that use an iodine impregnated resin. You have to be careful that nobody with a thyroid condition, no pregnant women can tolerate iodine. Get pregnant
So the-
men
so-
can.
Do you shake the water? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do you shake the water when you add the bleach or the tablet?
Yeah, you stir it, yeah. And then, to get rid of the taste, there's usually a neutralizing tablet, that you can put in after the regular disinfectant's been there long enough to get rid of the iodine taste and the chlorine taste.
So the answer is that water purification tablets can work, as well as bleach or boiling. And of course, boiling is a longer process and it requires energy. Other questions?
I have two questions. If I was going to have a lot of water stored, I heard that you need to have it in a cool place because you can't have, if you have it outside or something, because the temperature of the air could contaminate the water from getting heated up too much bacteria can grow. So what do you?
First of all,
So the first question, so everybody hears it, the question has to do with storing water. And that typically the advice is keep it in a cool and dark place, not you don't want it warm. And the question is why?
And also, you're going to put bleach in the container before you put the water in.
Where would you dig a hole in the ground and you put that in there, whatever you're storing the water in?
I don't know, it might crack the container or something.
Yeah.
The ground is freezing and thawing, freezing and thawing.
But typically your basement, if you have a
In the
basement,
basement.
yeah. So put it in the trunk of your car and drive around a little bit.
Maybe
Yeah.
a shed.
Yeah. Okay, we got a lot, go ahead.
What about also like large quantities of gasoline? I heard that gasoline doesn't stay good for a while, so there's some stuff
You have to
can
put
buy.
a stabilizer in the
Yeah,
gasoline.
exactly.
If you can have the gasoline last for years. I have a Cadillac
Right.
for sale that I use as a gas station. It has stabilizer in the gas tank.
Diane had a question over here.
I have a question. I've always been told to fill up a bathtub, like for water. So
Right.
if you do that, what would you do as far as?
That would be scenario number one. There's a problem, you're limited on water that you can get, you're gonna take what's in your house. Immediately fill up the bathtub. Now, I would then put that water into containers that have bleach. So you preserved it and you're disinfecting it
Yeah.
before you use it.
Question over here.
I'd like to know how long bottled water from the store will keep.
How long bottled water from the store will keep?
Right, they say 6 months is typical.
6 months.
Yeah, you can keep it longer than that if you get what's called a stabilized oxygen solution. You put that in there, you can get 10 years. But it's expensive.
Other questions? Myron?
With the advent of electrical power failure, okay, stores, banks, are they gonna have funds available for access?
No.
Do we keep, okay, for those, how much cash do we keep on hand for exchange?
That's a good question. How much cash should you keep on hand? And that's a comfort question. That's, that's a personal, what can you do and where can you keep it where you feel safe? We're not getting into issues here tonight about gold or silver or things like that. We're just talking about, which is a very real issue, okay? Anybody who's familiar with this, that's a very real issue. But as far as just basic paper cash and in what denominations, that's a question of how much you think you need in terms of buying stuff. The reality is, and I think Rich was the first one to say this, the reality is that the average grocery store operates on a 3-day inventory complete recycle, okay? That's based on regular buying patterns. When people hear something's coming, forget regular. That's why everything's out automatically. So if there's any kind of a disaster and it shuts down the road, that you're not going to get anything. That's why, number one, you want to be prepared, food, water, et cetera. But having cash on hand so that if you needed to purchase something, you can. And that's what brings up the barter question for a lot of people, or the things that a person would want to barter. And I would encourage you to go online and look up some of that, because there are things that you may not be interested in, but other people are interested in. And you might want to, consider that, because at some point, depending upon how long something goes on, cash doesn't matter as much. Comfort, survival, and a cigarette smoker, that's survival. I was, and a Nick fit's a real thing, okay? Other question, okay?
Reputable websites that we can turn to for resources.
You'll have a list of websites in the handout that you're going to get later on, and online. And you can go to the preparedness site. So
We didn't mention your pet, Fido and Rex. They need food and water.
I don't have Fido and Rex. I have Tohu and Bohu. And they're cats, so they're dinner.
They're on their own.
One more question. One more question. Anybody? Really? All those questions? Okay. Oh.
For storing water, what bottles could you reuse? Like we learned just recently, you can't reuse milk. Can you reuse juice bottles?
Juice bottles are perfect and water bottles are perfect. Just don't throw them all out, save some.
Jill.
Just one kind of tying it all together when John was talking about the barter system. Just like anything else, it's a great way to have a discussion with your family to just ahead of time, when you talk about even witnessing or helping others, decide amongst yourselves, what are we comfortable with? Would we be comfortable with maybe taking in a person or a family? Or do we want to save enough water for us and helping somebody else? Are we somebody who wants to volunteer some of our skills and talents to help in crisis situation? I think it's just a good conversation to have so you can prepare for yourself, but also already be preparing how you can witness in love and word and action.
Yeah, that's a good point. And in wrapping this up, let me just say this. We're not here to stimulate fear. What we're trying to do, and we've recognized as, the elders recognized 18 months ago, we need to prepare the body for what is going to happen. The government says it. We recognize it just watching the news. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and in what form. And so whether we're talking terrorism, whether we're talking about a natural disaster, things like that, it can be short-term or it can be extended, and that's a very real thing. We're not in a tornado alley, but we do get hurricanes, not this year, but we get hurricanes, and we do get blizzards and ice, and there can be things that have nothing to do with that. There can be things that happen somewhere else that affects the power grid and now affects us. Okay, so this is one of those topics where you don't want to think so much and just keep yourself awake at night, all right? But at the same time, you want to think logically and say, okay, what from a very general, practical standpoint can I do and can we do as a family? Before you leave here, I encourage you to take two things. One is the handouts. There's probably 7 or whatever pages in here, double-sided. So there's a lot of information which will cover pretty much everything that you've heard talked about tonight. Also, if you are interested, if you're not, then don't take it. But please, if you are interested, and we encourage you to pick up this thing that says Calvary Chapel Disaster Response Team Volunteer Application. It's going to ask you a lot of questions, which we're going to be able to build a database with this and to find out what skills people have so that we can begin to build a better team as we move forward, okay? So I thank you very much for listening. It's the first time we've done anything in this format before. All of you guys, I really appreciate your help in this. This is really good. You've done a lot of work. Thank you very much. Let's stand together. We'll pray. Lord, we thank you for the fact that you are ultimately our real resource, that you are ultimately the one who loves us. You are ultimately the one who does protect us. And so, Lord, we ask for continued wisdom. I know that there's a great level of interest here in this room, and that's exciting to see that, Lord. May it spread throughout the body so that people will take steps. And Lord, help us to be prepared. Yes, to be prepared to take care of our homes, but also prepared to continue to be the light in a very stressful situation. And so, Lord, may your blessing be on each one and on their homes here. Wisdom for them, Lord, as they start to think through these things or think more about a topic they already have, Lord. And as our nation, as this world slides into rougher and darker times, Lord, may may the Church of Jesus Christ, may Calvary Chapel of Central Bucks and the people who are here shine brighter than ever, Lord, that the gospel would go forth in the midst of difficulty and trauma, Lord, and in the process then unite the churches together, that we may be as one, that we will shine as your body here in a dark world, Lord. We love you. We thank you, Lord, for what you're doing here. In Jesus' name, amen. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to any of us up here.